In Chapter 1, Tam, a young woman with a wild heart, explores the monster market in Ardburg, a bustling area where mercenaries and monster traders converge. Despite her father's rules against joining mercenaries or entering the market, Tam finds herself drawn to the excitement. She encounters a merchant selling a cockatrice, which turns out to be just a large chicken, and interacts with her friend Willow, a serpent merchant. Willow mentions rumors of a new horde led by a giant named Brontide. As Tam moves through the market, she observes the grand entry of various mercenary bands, including Fable, the most renowned group. Fable's leader, Bloody Rose, captures her attention, and Tam proudly shares her knowledge of the mercenaries' feats, impressing a boy nearby. When the boy invites her for a drink, she rushes off, late for work, revealing her secret interest in girls and defying her father's rules. In Chapter 2, Tam, a young woman with a wild heart, works at the Cornerstone Tavern, where she is surrounded by colorful characters like Tara, the tough owner, Edwick, the retired bard, and her uncle Bran, a former mercenary. The tavern is busy as mercenaries and locals gather for the upcoming arena fights. Tam overhears talk of the Brummel Horde, and hears that Fable, a famous mercenary band, is in town. Bran introduces her to Fable's members, including the Druin Freecloud, the Inkwitch Cura, Brune, and Rose, the legendary leader. Fable is looking for a bard, and Rose challenges Tam to prove her worth by performing a song. Tam, eager for adventure, agrees. Rose warns her that the dangers ahead might be even worse than the Brummel Horde. Tam's fate with Fable hinges on her performance, and she must convince Rose she's the right choice for the band. In Chapter 3, Tam prepares for her performance in front of Fable, the mercenary band. On her way to the Cornerstone, she encounters the bustling streets of Ardburg, reflecting on her dreams of adventure. At the tavern, she is given Edwic's prized lute and reluctantly takes the stage. After a moment of doubt, she plays a song her mother wrote, impressing the audience and earning a spot with Fable. However, her joy is tempered by the tension at home. Her father Tuck is furious when he sees the lute, and despite her pleas, he forbids her from joining Fable. Tam argues that she wants to escape the mundane life he has planned for her, but her father's rage culminates in him destroying the lute, symbolizing the crushing of her dream. Feeling defeated, Tam leaves the house, determined to follow her path with Fable, regardless of her father's wishes. In Chapter 4, Tam wakes up after a sleepless night, reflecting on her broken lute and the emotional conversation with her father Tuck. He reluctantly lets her go, offering her her mother's lute, Hireth, as a parting gift. Tuck expresses his love, but makes it clear he can't handle the pain of watching her leave. Tam, determined to follow her dreams, packs and leaves, receiving final advice from her father. She heads to the Cornerstone to meet Fable, where she's introduced to Roderick, Fable's booker, who reveals that their previous bard is gone, and they're now seeking a new one. Tam's excitement and nerves mix as she joins the band, learning that they're leaving for a contract in Dire March. The chapter ends with Rose mentioning they never went to bed, preparing for the next phase of their journey. Tam's new adventure begins as she steps into her future with Fable. In Chapter 5, Tam arrives at the Ravine, an arena where Fable is preparing for a fight. It's a massive, crowded place, and Tam is overwhelmed by the chaos. She witnesses various mercenary groups and their preparations, including a bizarre performance by the Giants Bane group involving a cockatrice that's just a chicken. Tam also meets some of Fable's members, including Freecloud, Brune, and Cura. She watches as the Silk Arrows take on a Bandersnatch and the Dustskulls defeat a Minotaur. As Fable prepares for their match, Tam is introduced to the idea of mercenaries' necessary vices for enduring the horrors of battle. When the fight begins, the first monster to appear isn't a creature, but a man who is gruesomely killed by an enormous cyclops, sending the crowd into a frenzy. Roderick, Fable's booker, expresses his surprise, and Tam realizes the real danger has arrived. In Chapter 6, Tam watches Fable's battle with the Cyclops in the ravine. Rose sprints into action, using her enchanted scimitars to scale the creature's leg. Freecloud uses his prescience to avoid the Cyclops attacks, while Cura summons a fiery tree-like creature to fight it. The Cyclops ultimately destroys Cura's creation and advances toward Freecloud, knocking him unconscious. As Rose continues her fight, Tam is overwhelmed by the chaos and feels helpless. Seeing a bow unattended, Tam impulsively grabs it and runs onto the arena floor to confront the Cyclops. She struggles to draw the bow, but finally aims at the Cyclops' single eye. As she releases the arrow, she hopes it will make a difference in the fight and save Freecloud. In Chapter 7, Tam wakes up in the Rebels' redoubt after fainting in the arena. She's in Fighter's Camp, a massive party for mercenaries following the fight. Rose tends to Freecloud, who was injured during the Cyclops battle, and Tam feels guilty for her reckless actions. Rose reassures her that her bravery was appreciated, despite the risk. Tam learns that Rose had once killed a Cyclops and is known as a legend, but Rose admits she was afraid during the battle. Bran gives Tam advice about her new identity as the Bard, warning her about the dangers of fame. Tam reflects on her father's struggles and the life she's left behind. Later, she has a tense encounter with Lady Jane, who punches her for stealing her identity as the greatest archer. Meanwhile, Tam hears disturbing news about the Brumel Horde and the fall of Cragmore, pushing mercenaries to rally against the looming threat. In Chapter 8, Tam wakes up aboard the Rebels' redoubt, realizing she missed Fighter's Camp, the huge celebration after the fight. She finds the camp bustling with mercenaries, including the hungover Satyr Roderick, who turns out to be a friend of Fable. Tam is introduced to Penny, a member of the Outlaw Nation, and hears more about Fable's quirky members. Freecloud gives her a worn leather longcoat, originally owned by the infamous Duke of Endland, which she dons despite its grim history. Rose explains that the coat could save her life. Tam also learns that despite her actions, everyone now believes she killed the Cyclops, and she's quickly gaining fame. The band begins to prepare for their journey east, with Roderick in charge of driving. As they travel, Tam reflects on her new role as a bard, unsure if it's the life she wanted, but accepting it for now. In Chapter 9, Tam wakes up with a hangover and recalls the previous night's revelry. She finds Brune and Kira in the redoubt and learns about the consequences of getting drunk too often for Brune due to a past incident with Rose. The group talks about their various drinks and customs from different regions. Tam receives a long, worn coat from Freecloud, which once belonged to the Duke of Endland, a notorious villain. Upon arriving in Woodford, Fable's band is greeted by a few shocked locals, and Roderick struts around in his garish clothing. The town's innkeeper offers Fable lodging in exchange for publicity, while Tam overhears a peculiar conversation about a woman seeking help for her village, which is being haunted by a reanimated dog and its deceased owner. Brune deduces that a necromancer is behind it. Tam and Roderick later share a drink, and he opens up about the loss of his mother. In Chapter 10, Tam wakes up hungover and witnesses Brune's rough morning after a heavy drinking night. Rose and the group prepare for a fight at Woodford's arena, the Hysterium, which is smaller, but just as noisy as the ravine. Brune reveals he has been dealing with some personal issues, but is determined to fight. The band faces off against Men Without Helmets, a group of inexperienced mercenaries, while the wrangler Yeka uses drugs to give her team an advantage. Tam is shocked to learn that Fable's fights are sometimes manipulated for spectacle, and that Yeka uses poisons to control the monsters. The group later faces Tamoy, a formidable Raga in the arena. Rose is injured, and when Tam tries to intervene, Yeka stops her, warning her not to interfere. Despite the brutality, Tam realizes that fighting monsters isn't a game, and the violence carries heavy consequences. In Chapter 11, the battle with the resurrected Raga Tamoy continues as Brune and Kira face off against the monstrous creature. Tam wonders if a necromancer is responsible for Tamoy's return and recalls the strange woman who sought Fable's help. Brune charges at Tamoy, attempting to cut the Raga in half, but only succeeds in severing its arm. Kira summons a massive creature, Kurgan, to help, and together they defeat Tamoy, with Kurgan ultimately crushing the Raga's body. The crowd cheers, but Tam feels disturbed by the brutal spectacle. Later, the group settles in a tavern where they play a game of Kantha's Keep. Tam learns about Freecloud's father, Kantha, a powerful druid who created golems and their strained relationship. Tensions rise when Kira's pet butcher insults her and Roderick, but Kira quickly asserts control. The chapter ends with Kira claiming victory in the game, preparing for their next challenge. In Chapter 12, the tour reaches Rowan's Creek, known for its massive lumber mill. Fable faces off against undead gnolls, and Rose orders that they only fight living monsters from now on. Tam begins questioning the band's priorities as they pass on aiding villages in need, focusing instead on lucrative contracts. Later, they fight a massive red toad in Logger's lair, but Tam grows disillusioned with the spectacle of these arena battles. The band continues their journey, stopping in Barton and Bell Mill, where they fight goblins and a giant spider. In Salt Creek, Fable faces ogres, and in Piper, they share a small inn with other bands heading to Coldfire Pass to confront the Brumal Horde. Tensions rise when Sam the Slayer Roth confronts Rose about avoiding the Horde, and Rose reveals that their contract in Diremark involves the Simurgh, a dangerous dragon. The chapter ends with a chilling revelation. Freecloud's daughter is in Coverdale, potentially in danger. In Chapter 13, Fable's tour concludes in Highpool, a grand city with a massive statue of the tyrant Goakin, a Druin exarch. The city's crowd welcomes Fable enthusiastically, and Tam observes how many women resemble Rose. After a night of partying, including a visit to various brothels, Brune arrives at Tam's room in a drunken state, admitting to a bizarre encounter with a beaver. The next day, the band moves through several towns, each with its own oddities and battles, including fighting ogres and spiders. In Piper, the band faces a necromancer's undead monsters, which frustrates Rose. They're forced to confront a new contract and the looming threat of the Brumal Horde. Meanwhile, Tam learns more about Rose's daughter, Ren, and the mysterious nature of Kira's summoning abilities, including a shocking change to Tam's hair, which turns platinum blonde after Kira's treatment. In Chapter 14, Fable's tour arrives in Highpool, where they visit the newly restored Stone Garden Arena built by King Maladin Pike. Tam observes the eccentricities of the Prince of Ute, a solitary mercenary who doesn't fight with a band. Fable is set to fight a warband of orcs, and Rose decides they will take on all 77 orcs. After a brutal battle, Fable emerges victorious, and Rose steps in for the Prince of Ut in a fight against a Marilith, which she defeats dramatically. The crowd cheers, and Fable's tour continues with a celebratory party. During the party, tensions rise when Lyndon Gale, a member of the Were-Rats, accuses Rose of avoiding the fight at Coldfire Pass and insults her father. Rose, enraged, strikes him, silencing the room. The chapter highlights Fable's growing reputation, internal struggles, and Rose's determination to face bigger challenges despite criticism. In Chapter 15, a brawl erupts at the Gnarled Staff after Lyndon Gale insults Rose, leading to a chaotic fight among mercenaries, outlaws, and patrons. Brune transforms into a monstrous beast mid-fight, terrifying everyone in the tavern. Tam and the others try to survive the carnage, with Tam narrowly avoiding being crushed by Brune's feral rage. Rose and Freecloud battle the beast, but it continues its rampage, knocking over tables and scattering the group. Tam, in a desperate move, retrieves a vial Brannigan had given her and uses it to subdue Brune, stopping the rampage. The beast collapses after Tam uses the vial, and Penny, caught in the chaos, is gravely injured. Rose and the others are left to deal with the aftermath as Tam tries to process the horror of the fight and Penny's condition. The chapter emphasizes the raw violence of mercenary life and the emotional toll on its participants. In Chapter 16, Fable escapes Highpool after the chaotic brawl, with Rose and Freecloud purchasing horses and Roderick arriving with a cart. They make their way east, avoiding towns to keep a low profile, and end up at a farmer's barn. There, Rose trains Tam in swordplay, though Tam struggles with the technique. Afterward, Rose encourages Tam to pursue a romantic interest, and Tam has a secret encounter with the farmer's daughter in a trapper's shelter. Despite her inexperience, Tam learns and experiences intimacy for the first time. Afterward, she reflects on the experience and returns to the group. Brune, still under the effects of a quill, wakes up screaming, signaling that more chaos is ahead. The chapter highlights Tam's personal growth, her relationship with the other characters, and the challenges they face as they continue their journey. In Chapter 17, Fable prepares to leave Highpool with the group facing the aftermath of the brawl. Rose and Freecloud buy spare horses, while Roderick procures a cart from a corpse collector. They continue their journey east, avoiding towns due to the chaos in Highpool, and settle at a farmer's barn. Rose receives a communication orb from her father, Golden Gabe, informing her that the Horde has broken through Coldfire Pass. Gabe mentions the Simurgh, a legendary creature, confirming that Fable's contract involves hunting it. Kira explains the widow of Ruangoth, the contract's client, and hints at the challenges ahead. Afterward, Tam and Kira encounter a Bringle corpse, which leads to a tense moment when the creature awakens. They manage to calm it, using a cow's skull as a distraction. Fable's journey continues with more questions about the contract, while tensions rise among the group. In Chapter 18, Fable continues their journey, leaving behind the looming statue of Goakin. Tam spends the next days training with Rose, Brune, and Kira in combat, while honing her skills with a bow. The group arrives at an old mill in the Silverwood, where they meet Timber, a Treant who operates the mill and prefers not to speak of the Horde. Timber shares stories of his past, including his role in the failed invasion of Agria and the death of Blackheart. As they eat, Timber reveals that he recently killed a group of Horde members who came through the Silverwood, claiming that the Horde will fail, much like his past battles. Rose is visibly tense, recalling her experiences with the Horde. Freecloud suggests Lastleaf, the Horde's leader, would eventually turn on Grandual. Tam feels the weight of her past, particularly as she wears the Heathen's coat connected to Lastleaf. In Chapter 19, Fable travels through the Silverwood, with Tam grappling with doubts about their contract to hunt the Cymurg. After spending a restless night, Tam explores Timber's Trent home, where she reflects on childhood stories and her connection to Rose's mission. The group encounters a gruesome scene, the body of a dead pony, possibly slain by a bear. Brune reveals his troubled past with his father, the leader of the Silverwood Vargur, who killed a nobleman to become the clan leader and exiled Brune after a falling out. Brune also explains his struggle with finding his Fane, true animal form, and his eventual escape east, leading him to Rose. The group arrives at the ruins of an old home, and Brune expresses his need for his father's guidance. Before they can continue, Kira's loud shout interrupts their journey. In Chapter 20, Fable arrives at the Vargur settlement where Brune confronts his estranged father, Shadrach, the Clawmaster. Sorcha, a fierce Vargur woman, challenges Brune to enter the Fane Grove, an arena for a sacred one-on-one battle. Despite Rose's insistence on joining him, Brune asserts that this challenge is personal and cannot be interfered with. The group is forced to strip down, as the Vargur believe in fighting only in their natural forms. As Brune prepares for the fight, the band is painted with glowing, magical paste to resemble their respective Fanes. Brune receives his bear markings, while the rest of the group awaits their own transformation. The chapter focuses on Brune's past, his strained relationship with his father, and the arrival at the Fane Grove setting the stage for a critical battle. In Chapter 21, Brune faces his father Shadrach in the Fane Grove, an arena where Vargur engage in sacred battles. The Clawmaster, a towering red bear, challenges his son, accusing him of being unworthy and calling him an outcast. Shadrach reveals that Brune's mother, a wild heart, had left him for loyalty to her true family, and Brune's anguish grows as he realizes his father's betrayal. The two clash violently, their bodies shifting into monstrous forms as they fight. Brune, now a wolf, quickly gains the upper hand, overpowering his father despite Shadrach's strength. The fight intensifies, with Brune landing lethal blows, while Shadrach commands his followers to kill the traitor. As Brune continues to defeat his father, in their brutal battle, chaos erupts around them, setting the stage for a decisive moment. In Chapter 22, Brune confronts his father, Shadrach, in a brutal fight within the Fane Grove. Sorcha, Shadrach's ally, attempts to engage Fable's band, but Brune's rage fuels his transformation into a wolf, challenging his father. Their battle is violent, with Brune finally gaining the upper hand. As Shadrach is about to die, he begs Brune to take his place, but Brune rejects him, asserting his loyalty to his mother and his true self. Afterward, Brune's victory is acknowledged by the remaining Vargur, who name him Clawmaster despite his protest. The band, exhausted, spends the night in the Fane Grove, and Brune becomes more at peace with his past. Tam expresses interest in writing a song about his journey, to which Brune agrees, suggesting Shadow of the Wolf as the title. In Chapter 23, Fable arrives in Coltsbridge, a snow-covered town with a ramshackle wall and a lock-up inn. After a comedic exchange with Roderick, they meet the Widow's Warden, Hawkshaw, who speaks cryptically about their mission. Hawkshaw reveals that the Raincrows attempted to kill the Cymurg last year and failed, and that Rose's father was the Widow's first choice to fight the Dragon Eater. After securing horses for the journey, the group heads north, passing through the Rimesfield Mountains. Brune reflects on the past, reminiscing about simpler times before the bloodshed of performing for crowds. That night, the band rests in an abandoned village, where Tam begins composing a song about Brune's trial in the Fane Grove. With Kira's help, she practices singing and finds herself connecting with the summoner. The chapter ends with a sense of camaraderie and a new song beginning to take shape. In Chapter 24, Fable continues their journey toward Ruingoth, passing through the ruins of Diremarch. Tam learns from Hawkshaw that the region fell to Bronteid's horde, with many residents fleeing north to escape being used as arena fodder. As they reach a chapel, they encounter a pair of sinew, fox-like creatures, who explain that they were cast out for refusing to join the Horde. Despite their peaceful intentions, the creatures are killed by Hawkshaw, igniting Rose's anger. Hawkshaw justifies his actions, claiming that their presence was forbidden. Later, Tam and Freecloud reflect on the strange state of Diremarch, with Freecloud expressing his concerns about the town's mysterious fate. Tam, not particularly religious, listens as Freecloud reveals his belief that the gods are a lie. The chapter ends with an unsettling sense of something darker at play in Diremarch, and the group grows more suspicious of Hawkshaw's motives. In Chapter 25, Freecloud continues sharing the story of the Druins and their connection to the gods of Grandual, revealing that the Summer Lord and Winter Queen are actually Vespian, the Archon of the Old Dominion, and his wife Astra. After Astra's death, Vespian used the sword Tamara to bring her back, but the resurrection twisted her nature. Astra eventually gave birth to a son, Lastleaf, who stole Tamara to prevent his mother from being revived. Freecloud explains that Vespian, driven by guilt, pursued Lastleaf, eventually leading to the downfall of the Dominion. Saga later used Tamara to kill Lastleaf, and now, Freecloud believes the Winter Queen has returned from the dead, leading the Brumal Horde. As Fable travels toward Ruangoth, Freecloud hints at deeper connections between the rising dead and the Winter Queen's return, revealing a darker fate awaiting them. In Chapter 26, Fable arrives at the imposing Ruangoth, a majestic castle made of obsidian-like stone. Inside, they meet Grudge, an Aspian steward who is tasked with showing them to their rooms. After some comedic moments with Grudge's slow pace and peculiar behavior, the group is led through the cold, eerie castle, which is in disrepair. The atmosphere is tense, with empty halls, dusty furnishings, and cold drafts. The group settles into their respective rooms, with Tam feeling nostalgic for her home and family, leading her to cry out of loneliness and fear. She explores the castle's library, where she stumbles upon a book about Grudge's species and its history. When a skeletal rat appears, she kills it in a frantic panic. The chapter underscores the eerie and unsettling nature of their stay in the castle, with Tam's vulnerability highlighted through her moment of fear. In Chapter 27, Tam joins Cura in a parlor, where she finds the summoner carving a new tattoo on her arm. As Tam sits by the fire, the two share a quiet moment during which Cura opens up about her past. She reveals that her uncle Yomi, a summoner, was killed after fighting a dangerous gang, and her father, a criminal, later became abusive. After her mother died in a shipwreck, Cura was left to fend for herself, eventually using her own body to summon monsters. She explains how she summoned Kurgan and other creatures, each representing her fears. Cura shares the deep emotional toll of summoning, particularly the mental strain involved in giving life to a creation. After hearing her story, Tam is both moved and unsettled. The chapter ends with Tam lying next to Cura, reflecting on the trauma each of them has endured. In Chapter 28, the band has a cold breakfast prepared by Grudge, the turtle steward and cook of Ruangoth. Tensions are high between Tam and Cura, with the summoner remaining distant. The widow of Ruangoth arrives, and the group learns of her deep hatred for her late husband, the Marchlord, and her vengeful motivation to destroy the Cymurg. She promises Fable 50,000 court marks for their success in killing the creature. Despite the widow's cold demeanor, it's clear she's desperate to prevent the Cymurg from destroying Kaskar. Rose questions why the band is being sent to Mirrormere, a distant location, when they're already far from the monster's lair. The widow reveals that they will fly to their destination, hinting at an unexpected and possibly dangerous mode of travel. The chapter ends with Tam unsure of what's coming next, but aware that the widow's offer might not be as straightforward as it seems. In Chapter 29, the group boards the widow's skyship Spindrift to journey toward Mirrormere. Tensions remain between Tam and Cura after their awkward night together. As they prepare for departure, Tam learns more about the ship's unremarkable state and its eccentric captain, Don Doshi, who excitedly discusses the ship's strange engines. Hawkshaw, ever the stoic figure, oversees their departure. During takeoff, the ship's engines falter and the Spindrift plummets toward the canyon floor. In a desperate move, Doshi prays for the ship's engines to work, and after a tense moment, they manage to pull away from disaster. Tam is both relieved and exhilarated by the narrow escape. The captain, still upbeat, warns her that the real challenge lies ahead when they reach the storm wall. Meanwhile, the crew's interpersonal dynamics continue to simmer, with Tam uncertain about where her relationships with Kira and the others stand. In Chapter 30, tensions continue to simmer among Fable's members as they prepare to journey to Mirrormere. Tam's awkward interaction with Kira remains unresolved after their night together, with Kira admitting her emotional pain but pushing Tam away. Meanwhile, the group boards the skyship Spindrift, captained by Don Doshi, who shares his colorful past as a former pirate and his rise to ownership of the ship. Doshi reveals how he once stole the Spindrift, transforming it from a merchant's pleasure vessel into his own flying ship, and how he now works for the widow of Ruangoth out of convenience. The crew discusses the upcoming mission, including the deadly Seamerg, which the Raincrows failed to fight. Doshi grimly reveals that the Raincrows lasted only 17 seconds against the beast, setting a foreboding tone for the perilous journey ahead. In Chapter 31, Fable continues their journey toward the Seamerg's lair at Mirrormere. Tam grapples with emotional tension, particularly after Kira's cryptic conversation about her troubled past. On the skyship, the band shares a drink and listens to Don Doshi's tales of his pirating days. As they approach the storm wall, the skyship encounters violent weather, with Doshi navigating the chaos. Despite the terrifying experience, the ship survives, and they begin their final approach to the Seamerg's lair. Tam reflects on the flaws and complexities of her companions, realizing that they are all broken in some way but united in their mission. Rose, however, gives Tam an unsettling request. If the mission fails, she wants Tam to write a song for her daughter. As Rose prepares to confront the Dragon Eater, Tam is left with a heavy heart, thinking of a ballad that might capture Rose's legacy. In Chapter 32, Tam watches Fable prepare for the final confrontation with the Seamerg, feeling anxious about the impending danger. She has a tense exchange with Kira about their previous night, but the summoner shuts her down and Tam reflects on the pain both of them carry. As the band nears the Dragon Eater's lair, Doshi and Hawkshaw warn them of the danger, with Doshi suggesting the monster already knows they're coming. Tam realizes the Seamerg is beneath the ice, not overhead, and races to warn the others. In a moment of desperation, she shoves Hawkshaw and Doshi overboard to force the captain to fly the ship closer to the lair. Tam encounters the widow of Ruangoth in the captain's quarters and retrieves alchemical grenades to use against the creature. With Roderick piloting the ship clumsily, Tam spots the shadow of the Seamerg rising from the ice, signaling the deadly confrontation ahead. In Chapter 33, the Spindrift spirals out of control, dropping from the sky and crashing onto the ice of Mirrormere. As the ship slides and spins, Tam and the crew brace themselves for the Seamerg's arrival. The monster, far larger than any creature Tam had imagined, emerges from beneath the ice, terrifying the group. Despite its size, Rose and Freecloud launch an attack, and Brune tries to flank it. Tam watches in horror as Rose and Freecloud narrowly avoid being obliterated by the Seamerg's frosty breath. As the battle intensifies, Tam counts the seconds, fearing for her friends' lives. The crew fights valiantly, but the Seamerg is relentless, and its smaller offspring emerge from the lake. In a final desperate move, Tam tosses alchemical grenades at the Seamerg's face, causing it to howl in pain. However, the skyship's masts are torn down in retaliation, and Tam leaps into the frigid air as the ship plummets. In Chapter 34, the Spindrift crashes, landing on top of one of the Seamerglings and explodes. The surviving Seamergling, the monstrous Dragon Eater's offspring, retaliates fiercely. Tam and her band fight for survival as the Seamerg itself emerges from the ice, terrifyingly vast. Brune, Freecloud, and Rose engage the creature while Tam focuses on defending herself and Kira from the Seamerglings. The appearance of Bloody Rose, summoned by Kira's Inkling, adds to the chaos, taking down one of the Seamerglings. Amidst the battle, Tam is injured by Hawkshaw, who attacks her in a fit of rage, and she narrowly escapes death. While Freecloud and Rose continue their attack on the Dragon Eater, Tam and the others struggle to keep the Seamerglings at bay. She successfully shoots and kills the last Seamergling, but the fight is far from over, and Tam faces the terrifying reality of confronting the Dragon Eater. In Chapter 35, Rose faces the Seamerg in a final, desperate attempt to kill it. After an intense battle, she plunges her swords deep into the creature's body, fatally wounding it. As the Seamerg collapses into Mirrormere, the group watches in awe, but their relief is short-lived. The widow, previously believed to be dead, appears alive and on fire, striding purposefully across the ice. It's revealed that she is the Winter Queen, a necromancer, and the wife of the deceased Marchlord. She uses her powers to revive Hawkshaw, her enslaved champion, and forces him to continue serving her. The widow's ominous presence threatens the group, but Cura, in defiance, insults her, provoking the Winter Queen to demonstrate her power by raising a dead Cymurgling. The tension rises as the widow's intentions become clearer, leaving the group to face a much darker threat than anticipated. In Chapter 36, after the Dragon Eater is defeated, the group faces a dire situation as the widow reveals herself as the Winter Queen, an undead sorceress. She revives Hawkshaw, her unwilling servant, and explains her obsession with Gabriel, the man who killed her son. The band is left reeling as the widow commands the resurrected Cymurg and its offspring. Meanwhile, Rose is gravely ill from taking Lion's Leaf and is on the brink of death. Despite their dire circumstances, Farrager and the Yethics, beastly creatures, arrive, offering help. They guide the group to their caves, where they warm up and tend to Rose. As Tam regains her strength, she learns more about Freecloud's past with Rose, their turbulent history, and his devotion to her. Farrager brings back Doshi, still alive, and Tam's cherished instrument, Hireth, miraculously intact. However, the group is left wondering what their next steps will be in a world that feels increasingly hostile. In Chapter 37, the group adjusts to their new surroundings as the Yethics divide the spoils from the wreckage of the Spindrift. Tam and the others learn more about Farrager's past and the Raincrow's ill-fated attempt to kill the Cymurg, revealing their desperation and the danger of hubris. The Yethics, named after their favorite things, create a unique, vibrant community. Tam also reflects on Rose's struggles, her desire to outshine her father, and the burden of being his daughter. Rose confesses her initial resentment towards motherhood and her inner conflict. She reveals that killing the Cymurg has given her the closure she needed, and now, for the first time, she feels ready to try again. Their moment of reflection is interrupted by the arrival of a sky ship, the Old Glory, her father's ship. Rose is determined to move forward, and her journey, both as a mercenary and a mother, continues. In Chapter 38, the group bids farewell to the Yethics, with Farrager deciding to stay behind with his new family. They board the Old Glory, where they meet Arcandius Moog, a wizard from Saga who has a colorful history. Moog's arrival brings levity to the group as they discuss their past exploits. Gabriel, Rose's father, is introduced, and the group learns about the Brummel Horde, led by Brontide, who is fighting for survival. Freecloud reveals that this horde is different from others, driven by desperation rather than vengeance. They also discuss Astra, the Winter Queen, who is tied to the horde and seems to be playing a dangerous role in the conflict. The chapter ends with a sense of anticipation as the group prepares for the next leg of their journey, and Tam realizes she will be the one to tell the group's story. In Chapter 39, Tam recounts the group's journey to Gabriel, leading to a tense conversation with him and Rose about their past decisions. Gabriel expresses frustration over their risky actions, particularly fighting the Cymurg, and Rose defends her motivations. Tensions rise as they discuss the consequences of their choices, including Gabriel's guilt over the destruction caused by his past actions. Meanwhile, Freecloud shares his insights on the Brummel Horde, emphasizing their desperation. As they continue their journey, Farrager bids them farewell, deciding to stay with the Yethics. On board the Old Glory, they meet Arcandius Moog, Gabriel's old companion, who brings humor and levity to the situation. The group learns more about the situation with the Brummel Horde, with Gabe confirming its growing numbers. As they approach Grey Vale, a burning forest signals the arrival of a new threat, smoke, not a storm. The chapter sets the stage for the next phase of their journey. In Chapter 40, the aftermath of the battle against the Brummel Horde is revealed. Brontide and his army are dead, and the battlefield is littered with corpses from both sides. Tam and her band arrive to a grim scene, where mercenaries and scavengers pick over the remains, and the air is thick with smoke. They encounter Sam the Slayer Roth, who shares stories about the destruction, including the defeat of a monstrous infernal. Rose is particularly concerned about whether her father's old comrade, Bran, survived. After learning that Bran likely perished, the band continues their trek through the wreckage, passing destroyed creatures and a ruined skyship. They also find the Prince of Ute dead, mourned by a woman who initially seems to grieve, but reveals herself to be the Winter Queen, setting the stage for more confrontation. The chapter ends with the unsettling presence of the Winter Queen, foreshadowing further danger. In Chapter 41, the band confronts Astra, the Winter Queen, who reveals her twisted plans, Rose throws a sword at Astra, but it misses, and Astra summons the undead Dragon Eater. The massive creature kills Brontide, whose final moments are marked by a desperate plea. Astra, once a Druid, recounts her tragic past, blaming Gabriel for the fall of her son, Lastleaf, and the destruction of the Dominion. Rose taunts her, pushing Astra to admit her intentions, not to rule, but to end the world. Astra's necromancy is revealed as the force behind the reanimated army, and she intends to bind all life to her and free herself from immortality. Amidst the threat of total annihilation, Rose makes a sarcastic remark about Astra's lost ear, catching the sorcerers off guard. This moment of distraction gives the band a brief opportunity to regroup as they face Astra's devastating power. In Chapter 42, the battle intensifies as Astra, the Winter Queen, summons the dead to fight for her. Rose attempts to strike, but Astra's necromancy raises a wall of thralls between them. Amidst the chaos, the group fights their way through the reanimated corpses and the bloodthirsty Simurgh. Rose's mercenary band struggles to keep their footing as they fight monsters and undead, with Brune, Freecloud, and others clearing paths for escape. Rose is determined to kill Astra, but realizes the task is impossible with the undead army surrounding them. In a desperate retreat, they encounter Gabriel, who is struck by a poisoned bolt from Hawkshaw's crossbow. As the situation grows dire, they're forced to leave the battlefield with Gabriel in critical condition. Brannigan reappears unexpectedly, alive, and after learning about Gabriel's condition, Rose decides to take him to Clay Cooper, despite the dangers ahead. In Chapter 43, Gabriel dies at dawn, and the group continues their journey to Clay Cooper's Inn, bypassing the chaotic evacuation of Coverdale. Rose remains composed as she tends to her father, but the loss weighs heavily on everyone. They arrive at Slowhand's Inn, where Clay Cooper, Gabriel's longtime friend, awaits. Moog delivers the news of Gabriel's death to Clay, who responds with quiet sorrow, offering to carry Gabriel's body inside. The mercenaries in the yard show respect, kneeling in reverence to the fallen hero, a sign of his legacy despite his flaws. Inside the inn, Clay carries Gabriel with care, and Rose follows him silently, accompanied by her bandmates. Tam, hesitant, is urged by her uncle Bran to witness the moment. What happens inside remains unspoken, but Tam emerges forever changed, bearing the weight of grief and loss. She becomes more distant, but loves more fiercely and occasionally weeps when it snows. In Chapter 44, the group builds a pyre for Gabriel, and Tam is tasked with looking after Ren. In the stable, Ren shows Tam around and introduces her to the owlbears Moog has been caring for. Afterward, the group prepares to leave as a fierce storm looms in the distance. Rose, still numb from her father's death, delivers a heartfelt eulogy for Gabriel, acknowledging his love for his bandmates and his sacrifice for her. As Gabriel's pyre is lit, a terrifying shriek interrupts the moment. The Dragon Eater approaches. The mercenaries panic and chaos erupts. Rose leads the charge to the stable, followed by Freecloud and the others, to mount their horses and flee. With the Simurgh in the sky, the group heads south to Conthus, leaving the ashes of Gabriel behind, and Tam witnesses the profound grief of those left behind, particularly Rose and Slowhand. In Chapter 45, the group arrives at the free city of Canthaz, a lawless haven for criminals and mercenaries. Rose, Freecloud, and their companions make their way through the city, passing through the monster market and witnessing the harsh conditions faced by creatures held captive for arena fights. Rose plans to recruit mercenaries and gather alchemists and stormers for their fight against the Frost Mother, Astra. She sends Brune to visit the fighting pits, Kira to gather alchemists, and Moog to find old contacts in Sinkwell. Rose's leadership is firm as she navigates the city's chaos. Meanwhile, the group's objective becomes clear: to prepare for Astra's assault. Tam, along with Freecloud and Ren, is tasked with ensuring safety away from the coming battle. As they plan, Rose resolves to protect her daughter and prepare the city's dead, ensuring no one is turned against them by Astra's necromantic power. In Chapter 46, the group approaches the ancient fortress of Lamnith, with Tam, Rose, Freecloud, and Ren navigating a treacherous climb. They descend into a dark corridor where Rose uses a seashell to illuminate the path. The group enters a vast underground hall, which transforms through Freecloud's moonstone coin, revealing a foundry-like space where golems work. Freecloud introduces his daughter to Orbison, a golem friend from his childhood, before leading them deeper into the citadel. Freecloud explains his father's tragic history, including his failed attempts at diplomacy and his obsession with creating constructs. As they venture into the upside-down forest, a strange, eerie place filled with failed hybrid creatures, they encounter Kantha, Freecloud's father, who is now an aberration. He welcomes his son home, revealing himself as the last living exarch of the Old Dominion, setting the stage for an unsettling reunion. In Chapter 47, Freecloud and his group arrive at Lamnith, where his father, the exarch Kantha, resides. Kantha is absorbed in crafting complex constructs, showing his obsession with creating and controlling them. He displays his work on a spider-like construct, but dismisses his son's plea to stay with him. Freecloud and Rose are confronted by their strained relationship, with Freecloud revealing his desire to stay in the Citadel for safety, especially for their daughter Ren. Rose is conflicted, arguing they must fight Astra to protect Kanthus, while Freecloud insists the mercenaries can handle it without them. Tensions rise when Rose admits Astra killed Freecloud's father, leading to Freecloud's resigned acknowledgement. Kantha, indifferent to Rose's presence, dismisses her by name, further deepening the rift. Freecloud's decision to stay behind with Ren causes a rift between him and Rose, marking a significant turning point in their relationship. In Chapter 48, Rose bids farewell to her daughter Ren in what feels like their last moments together. Tam and Freecloud reflect on the consequences of the battle ahead. Freecloud reveals his father, Kantha, is a reclusive figure, deeply obsessed with creating constructs and machines. Kantha's cruel treatment of the golem Orbison, whom he disfigured for disobedience, reveals his lack of empathy. The group, led by Freecloud and accompanied by Orbison, enters a different part of Lamnith where Kantha works on grotesque creations. Rose confronts Kantha about Astra's actions and insists they must stop her before she attacks Kanthus. The tension between Rose and Freecloud reaches a breaking point as Freecloud decides to stay with Kantha, leaving Rose frustrated. The city, oblivious to the impending threat, continues its revelry. Rose, determined to protect her daughter, orders the burning of bodies, but the dead in the pit reveal disturbing threats, including plans to harm Ren. Rose's fury erupts, and Tam confronts the priest who had mocked her, silencing it with her knife. In Chapter 49, Rose, Tam, and Freecloud meet with Slowhand and Moog, who are discussing plans with city delegates. Don Doshi, a pilot who had abandoned them, returns, and Rose confronts him about his betrayal. Doshi admits to returning due to being trapped in the city, surrounded by fiends. The group learns that Astra, the Winter Queen, is planning a trap for Rose. Confronted by multiple mercenary leaders, Rose rallies them, stressing the need to unite against Astra's army, which is nearly unstoppable. The Agrian commander is skeptical, but Rose convinces them that if they don't fight together, they'll all die. The meeting is tense, but ultimately, Rose presents a plan to confront Astra. The chapter highlights growing alliances and the urgency of their mission as they prepare to face the Winter Queen and her undead horde. In Chapter 50, Tam and the group observe the Agrians leaving Kanthus, the city filled with drunken revelry in preparation for Astra's arrival. Rose, aware of the impending danger, suggests that everyone abandon her, but her companions refuse, pledging to fight by her side. The tension grows when Rose confronts Don Doshi, who admits he returned because he's trapped in the city, surrounded by fiends. Meanwhile, in the Starwood, Rose confronts the local mercenary leaders about uniting against Astra's horde. The group bands together, including notable figures like Larkspur and Slowhand, but they are also warned of the overwhelming odds they face. As the city falls into chaos, Tam plays a song on her mother's lute, which, amplified by magic, echoes throughout Kanthus. The entire city joins in, singing defiantly as they brace for battle. Tam ends the performance by smashing the lute, symbolizing the end of an era. In Chapter 51, Tam reflects on smashing her mother's lute, feeling a sense of release and closure. She has chosen to stop being a detached observer and become an active participant in the battle ahead. Rose, witnessing this transformation, jokingly fires Tam as a bard and welcomes her to Fable. The group prepares for Astra's assault on Kanthus. Rose and Slowhand organize the city's defense, while mercenary bands are assigned roles in the plan. Tensions rise as Rose deals with various leaders, including Electra and Ios, who turn on each other. Meanwhile, Roderick negotiates with the creatures in the monster market, offering them a choice between freedom and death. The mood turns somber as the weather worsens, and Rose urges the group to rest. In their shared room, Tam and Kira have a quiet moment of reflection. As dawn breaks, the Horde arrives, signaling the start of the battle. In Chapter 52, Tam and the group prepare for the inevitable battle against Astra's Horde. They observe the vast and monstrous army surrounding Kanthas, including Brontide and a variety of grotesque creatures. Tam reflects on the bleak reality of their situation. Rose and the others strategize, with Rose focusing on using decoys and ambushes to lure Astra into the city. The group faces the challenge of holding off the enemy on two fronts. Rose decides to release the city's captive monsters, promising them freedom and vengeance against Astra. As the gates open and the monsters charge, the group, including Tam and Kira, rushes to the heart of the Horde. Amidst the chaos, Rose leads the charge, sword raised and cloak billowing. Tam realizes that this moment, with its fierce determination, would have made for a legendary song, if only there were a bard to capture it. In Chapter 53, Tam and her companions face off against Astra's Horde, a gruesome array of undead creatures led by Astra's personal minions, including Brontide and Hawkshaw. Tam, armed with a glass sword from Moog, fights alongside Kira, Brune, and other allies in the chaos. Rose leads the charge towards Astra's palanquin, but as they near, Hawkshaw appears, and an intense confrontation unfolds. Rose, driven by the desire for revenge, faces Hawkshaw despite the risk to their mission. Tam urges Rose to leave, emphasizing the greater threat posed by Astra. As Rose engages with Hawkshaw, they are surrounded by more of Astra's thralls, and it seems they have lost the battle. Just when hope seems lost, Tam hears a mysterious sound, birdsong amidst the chaos, offering a glimmer of hope as something powerful emerges from the city to turn the tide. In Chapter 54, Freecloud reveals he hasn't abandoned his friends or Kanthas, bringing with him a legion of golems and giant knights to aid Fable in their battle against Astra's Horde. As Rose and her allies fight their way toward Astra, they are surrounded and pressed from all sides by undead creatures, including the monstrous Brontide. Amid the chaos, Freecloud fights alongside Rose, cutting a path through the Horde. Rose, determined to defeat Astra, continues to charge forward despite the risks, and as Hawkshaw, Astra's servant, pursues her, Tam realizes that Rose and Freecloud are inseparable, like the scabbard and the sword. Meanwhile, Freecloud's golems hold off the Horde's attacks and reinforcements from Kanthas arrive. Tam faces the overwhelming fear of the undead and the immense Brontide, but finds courage in the bond she shares with Fable. Together, they push forward, united against the terror that surrounds them. In Chapter 55, the Simurgh arrives, devastating Kanthas as it rips apart Freecloud's golems. Rose and her bandmates struggle against the overwhelming forces of Astra's Horde. Amidst the chaos, Kira unleashes her most powerful inklings, sacrificing her power to create them. As the Simurgh's health deteriorates, Fable's monsters join the fray, with Rose and Freecloud fighting relentlessly. The Simurgh is eventually destroyed when Rose's apparition, Bloody Rose, explodes inside it, dealing a fatal blow. However, Astra retaliates, and the golem's power fades, leaving them vulnerable. As Brontide and Astra's thralls close in, Freecloud, Rose, and their allies begin to flee, with the Old Glory skyship arriving just in time. After an emotional moment, Kira is safely taken to the sanctuary while Rose prepares for the Winter Queen's final assault on Kanthas. In Chapter 56, Rose and her band continue to fight Astra's forces in the streets of Kanthas. They clash with Astra's undead army in Knight's Landing, where the Arachnian Baron Katuo and his kin fight fiercely but fall to the onslaught. As they retreat, they face Brontide's devastating attack, with a massive war tortoise and its Saig defenders coming into play. The battle intensifies, and despite Astra's minions overwhelming them, Freecloud's golems create a temporary advantage. Rose leads Fable's retreat through Saltkettle and Riverswell, but Astra's army presses forward relentlessly. During a fight with Astra's thralls, Tam makes a narrow escape from a horde of attacking imps. They reach the eastern gate, and Rose confronts Astra directly, leading to a tense exchange. Astra reveals her true form, the Devourer of Worlds, Tamaret. Rose, unfazed, declares that she is the fire, not the ashes, rallying her forces to face the Winter Queen's wrath head-on. In Chapter 57, the battle against Astra intensifies as Rose leads her army of red-haired warriors into the streets of Kanthas. Rose unveils her new appearance with most of her iconic red hair shaved off, resembling Gabriel. Freecloud and Rose's forces face Astra's Horde, using everything from firebombs to giant stone elephants in their efforts. Amid the chaos, Astra's army is momentarily thrown into disarray, but the battle rages on with both sides suffering heavy losses. Rose's doubles, acting as distractions, fall one by one, while Rose and Freecloud push forward. Despite some victories, the tide turns when Brontide's reanimated body continues to wreak havoc, and Hawkshaw makes another attempt at killing Rose. In a desperate moment, Brannigan is impaled by Hawkshaw's bone sword, leaving Tam in shock. The group is forced to continue their fight as Rose prepares to confront Astra, with the end in sight. In Chapter 58, Rose leads her army of red-haired warriors into the streets, with the battle escalating against Astra's forces. Tam watches as Rose, now with her golden hair exposed, fights in perfect unison with Freecloud, attacking Astra's thralls with unmatched skill. As Rose and Freecloud fight their way toward Astra, Hawkshaw, who has been a lingering threat, attacks but is ultimately dealt with by Slowhand. Rose's intense charge toward Astra is interrupted when Freecloud sacrifices himself to protect her from a fatal blow. Rose, devastated, continues her fight fueled by grief and rage. With Astra's defenses weakened, Tam takes the shot she's been waiting for, using her bow to help Rose deliver the killing blow to Astra. The Winter Queen falls, and the horde collapses. However, Rose, fatally wounded, succumbs to her injuries and collapses beside Freecloud, ending the battle but leaving Tam with a heart-wrenching loss. In the epilogue, Tam reflects on the aftermath of Conthus' fall. The city, once destroyed by fire, was now a symbol of rebirth, but this time it was truly gone. Tam recounts how the survivors of the battle, including Brune and Cura, dealt with the losses. Rose, transformed by grief, continues her fight, and Tam's feelings for her best friend grow complex. Lady Jane and Doshi marry, and the group begins to plan their future. Tam, with Cura, travels north, visiting old places and coming to terms with her past. They encounter a changed Kantha, now sending golems to aid the world. Tam reflects on the legacy of Bloody Rose, who, though dead, will be remembered forever. The final poignant moment shows Tam reuniting with her daughter Ren in the ruins of the Heartwild, symbolizing a new beginning and the personal transformation of Tam into a mother.